In 2011, the Women's Super League was created, with the aim of giving women's football a proper platform to be played on and move it towards becoming a fully professional sport.
But where did it all begin? Well, believe it or not, the largest team in the history of women's football came from right here in the city of Preston, the Dick Kerr ladies football team.
They were a women's football team formed at a munitions factory in Preston during the First World War to raise money for wounded soldiers, and that's how it all started. The first game was played on Christmas Day 1917 in front of 10,000 spectators at Deepdale. I remember when the European Championships were played in the area in 2005, and the FA invited the Dick Kerr ladies to Deepdale to watch the match, and I think it was Germany and Sweden that were playing. And at half-time they introduced the Dick Kerr ladies to the crowd. And up until then they didn't realise who they were, but as soon as they said, everybody was round them, and there was this German reporter, and he said to me, "We don't have this kind of history in our country, and nobody else does."
During the First World War, factories up and down the country were forming ladies' football teams to raise money, but none were anywhere near as successful as the team from Preston. 20,000 fans would pack themselves into Deepdale to watch them play, and on Boxing Day in 1920, 53,000 people paid to see them play a game at Goodison Park. But all stories need an element of tragedy, and in 1921, the FA said that the sport wasn't suitable for ladies and banned women's football.
Well, it was like a mortal, blow to them, really. If you look at it and look at men's football today and women's football, if women's football would have been allowed to grow at the same level, then we'd all be superstars now, wouldn't we? It's just biggest sporting injustice of the last century, in my opinion.
The ban lasted for 50 years and meant that no women's team could play on any pitch owned by the FA or its affiliates. Once it had been lifted, women's football could start growing again, and in 1972, England played Scotland in the first ever England's women's international game.
Well, the conditions were bad. We were in Greenock. Nobody else played that day. We decided to play at Scotland as well because we'd travelled so far.
It looked like Scotland were going to send England home disappointed when they scored 2 early goals, but this all changed when Sylvia got hold of the ball.
I was inside my own half, and I think it was Pat Davis released the ball. I ran onto it, and there was about 3 or 4 players behind me running after me, and I was having all sorts of things going through my mind, saying, "Oh, what if I slip? It could bobble. I could kick it out." Anyway, I didn't. I slotted it past the keeper, and I was just over the moon. I was pounced on by everybody. It was an experience, I must say, but very often think back to it now, to that goal.
Sylvia's goal sparked a comeback which saw England win that match 3-2, and since then, women's football has been growing steadily in this country as an amateur sport. In 1992, when the Premier League was created, the Women's Premier League was also created, and since then, Arsenal have been dominating. However, with the creation of the WSL, things are starting to change.
In the past, before the WSL was around, you'd kind of expect that Arsenal were going to go in, they were going to win every game 6-7-0, and you could really predict the scores, but at times now you kind of come off the pitch and you're like, how did the other teams get on? And there's always a few surprise results, which for fans is brilliant, and obviously always raising the profile of the women's game.
The profile of the women's game has certainly been raised. The Euros in 2013 saw records broken not only for tickets into the different matches, but for TV viewing figures as well. And this growing interest has also prompted BT Sport to buy the rights to cover the Women's Super League.
8 teams make up the league every year, and each team receives £70,000 funding from the FA. This extra money allows them to have a small handful of players on fully professional contracts.
2014 sees the next phase of this development with the creation of the WSL2, a second tier to the league structure with 10 teams battling it out for just one promotion spot into the Super League, meaning that WSL teams face the threat of relegation for the first time.
The increased revenue and the extended TV and media coverage can only be a good thing for these women's teams. But as in the men's game, money favours those who have it. So what about the smaller teams that haven't made it into the Super League?
It is a concern that I have with these teams in the lower divisions because they're going to lose their better players. Even the likes of Blackburn Rovers are losing players a lot, and they're bringing them through the centres of excellence and into the first team. And that's the way forward it was. But now because the WSL is started up, then you're getting players, being snatched from here, there and everywhere.
I do fear that being in a situation that we're in, that the clubs below are being forgotten about somewhat. We've lost all bar 3, so last season's team, the finishing registered team that we have 3 of those players still at the club. So it's had a massive impact on us. I suppose if you're looking for positives, it's good that we can produce players good enough to play in the Super League. But on a negative, it's absolutely ripped us apart, and we've had to build a new team. It's been a frustrating season. It still is, because we're still having players effectively being cherry-picked for the Super League.
The Women's Super League is a great opportunity for female footballers, but the sport is still only semi-professional.
Obviously, if you're fortunate enough to be in that position, there may only be, say, 5 or 6 players who can actually make a living out of it in a team. But you know, that's great. It's great for them. Unfortunately, that's not the case at our level. But like I said, I didn't expect anything like that when I was growing up, and I play for the love of the game, not for any kind of money.
Women's football still has a long way to go if it wants to reach the same crowd sizes that the Dick Kerr ladies did. But with the ever-expanding Super League, it does look like it's moving in the right direction. And one day soon, we may see stands like this full again.
I think it's just fantastic that opportunities are given to more clubs. With promotion and relegation now as well, that'll increase the competitiveness, and it's just better for women's football as a whole, I think.
And where do you see the future of women's football going now?
Just kind of getting better each season. I think change always takes time. It's not going to be as big as the men's game, we know that. It's just got to get better with each season, and I think we're definitely heading in the right direction. You've got players now who are full-time, who don't have to work, and a few years ago that wouldn't have even been thought of. So I think we've just got to kind of be steady with it, but just keep watching the progress, and hopefully it'll get bigger and better in time.